प्रज्ञापारमिताचर्या चरमाणो व्यवलोकयते स्म पञ्चस्कन्धाः तांश्च स्वभावशून्यान् पश्यति स्म। ईशारिपुत्र रूपं शून्यता शून्यतैव रूपम् रूपान्न पृथक् शून्यता शून्यतान्न पृथक् रूपम् यद्रूपं सा शून्यता या शून्यता तद्रूपम् एवमेव वेदना संज्ञा संस्कार विज्ञानम् इहं शारिपुत्र सर्वधर्म शून्यता लक्षणा अनुत्पन्ना अनिरुद्धा अमला विमला अनूना अपरिपूर्णा तस्मात् शारिपुत्र शून्यतायां न रूपं न वेदना न संज्ञा न संस्कार न विज्ञानम् न चक्षु श्रोत्र घ्राणजिह्वा कायमानसा न रूप शब्द गन्ध रस स्प्रष्टव्य धर्माः न चक्षुर्धातुर्यावन्न मनो विज्ञानधातु न अविद्या न अविद्याक्षयो यावन्न जरा मरणं न जरा मरणक्षयो न दुःख समुद्ध निरोधमार्गा न ज्ञानं न प्राप्तिर् न अप्राप्तिः तस्मात् शारिपुत्र अत्रात्तित्वात् बोधिसत्त्वस्य प्रज्ञापारमितामाश्रित्य विहरति अचित्तावरणः चित्तावरण नास्तत्वात् अत्रस्तो विपर्यासाधिकातो निष्ठा निर्वाण प्राप्तः त्रय्यध्व व्यवस्थिताः सर्वबुद्धाः प्रज्ञापारमिताम् आश्रित्य अनुत्तराम् संबोधिम् अभिसम्बुद्धाः तस्मात् ज्ञातव्यं प्रज्ञापारमिता महामन्त्रो महाविद्यामन्त्रो अनुत्तरमन्त्रो असमसममन्त्रः सर्वदुःखप्रशमनः सत्यम् अमिथ्यत्वात् प्रज्ञापारमितायां तो मन्त्रः तद्यथा गते
So, good afternoon, everybody. As yesterday I mentioned, the practice of tolerance and forgiveness, these things is common, all major tradition. So some of the Shantadeva's sort of the brilliant sort of way of presentation, I think, applicable to other believers. Okay. Except if there's some sort of explanation or reasoning according to the Buddhist way. So except that, many things we can use with different faith. Okay. Then one sort of theistic believer, one time in Jerusalem, one meeting, so one Jewish teacher told at the meeting, he advised some, in his class, there are some Palestinians, some Israeli students together. So he advised, so when the people meet someone who usually get some anger or irritation, then at that time you should think the other, the person who you get some sort of uncomfortable, consider image of God. So afterward, many Palestinian students, report to him, after sort of Kasota listened, after heard that sort of advice or suggestion, when they meet some Israeli checkposts or people, usually they got some kind of uncomfortable or sometimes irritation. So when they imagine that person also image of God, then immediately reduce the mental level sort of irritation. So these are the method to reduce anger, hatred. According to theistic religion, we all created by God, so everyone have some kind of spark of God. Everybody have. So thinking this line, very, very helpful. Again, this morning I mentioned, I think it is important to make distinction, action and actor. Actor is concerned, think, God has the image of God. Action is concerned, sometimes necessary to take countermeasure in order to stop that wrongdoing action. Not out of anger, but out of sense of concern of their well-being. If you let them take advantage of some wrongdoing continuously, eventually they will suffer. So, out of sense of concern of their well-being, then take a countermeasure. So that's very balanced. Mental level, never let anger, hatred, not develop anger and hatred, then fear automatically reduce. Meantime, according to circumstances, shows it necessary to countermeasure. You can take countermeasure. Clear? That actually is we are doing. For example, some of these Chinese hardliners, you see, for their action is concerned, we openly criticize and oppose. But we never develop anger, hatred towards these people. So, and for example, when we make, confession, at that moment we make distinction. My wrong action and myself. Isn't it? Now I realize that action is wrong. So I confess. So we have the ability to make distinction, action and actor. So similarly, look, others make distinction, their action and the person who carried that action. So to a first person, forgiveness. towards action, not forgiveness. Take countermeasure. Okay. So now this chapter, today's is chapter 8, is mainly explaining about the value and how to practice infinite altruism. This also generally common with all other sort of traditions. Now, first paragraph on Tangut. Tata Zundu Jenny in Dingzilla Sha. 7 number of years me, Mumucha Tana next.
No.
Dingin is sim Zichigo Yon, sim Zichigo Yon Shaw, Samaruchi. Sim Zichigo Chuna, Samazanga, sim Zichigo Yumarwa. Go shoot Kongo. Comni sim Zichigo Nayaji, Yontuya, Simgi, Kazur Pugeta, the Buddhist psychology, Dishigdua, the ancient Indian psychology, the Buddhist psychology, Chenota, Kada Sem Kundungas, Taganishing Union, Takara Sem Rangshesu Page, Sem Pige, Miguel Lotearchik, this Simju Sambasat. Miguel Teni, Chik, you want tired of chick. You want them just some tired of chick. And then, Piggy Chick Doctor Chad. The Miguel Piggy Sem Teni, Miguel Tegan Lotus Deagi, natural chick or Shiggy. That's some physical truth at it. Tindeg net banner, Chick you shave, Chick Namju Chick Yedavati, Coach John Dachene, Yang Yang to put Shiro Lot Chang Duzane, Shiro Church to give a nation. Piggy Miguel Sem Duspa Nayak, natural Yedavati, Yang Park Castle, Kumri Chene, Combitana, any coin and never church to Yedavati. So, Zareko, you choose the Shiro Ranches Yeding chair.
तो जो कि ध्यान पारमिता या फिर सहसुरता खासकर जो सहसुरता की बात कही गई थी वो सारी की सारी परंपरा में समान है। तो अगर हम कामना करें कि हम समाधि की अवस्था में पहुंच जाएं, केवल कल्पना करते रहें।
Naturally for us, it comes through familiarization. What in one of the mental factors is considered to be that of concentration. Here, of course, there's a basic aspect of the mind being able to focus on something, but then the single-pointed concentration must come through training of the mind. And so, although there is a basic cognitive nature of the mind, which with you through your training, you can actually intensify its power to concentrate on the object, and then develop this single-pointed concentration on any chosen focus. And so basic mind has this cognitive nature, being able to perceive or see things. But then through training, what we do is we make this more intense and intensified, and therefore you are able to develop this concentration through familiarization.
Now I would like to explain something about how to meditate, single-pointed meditation. Now this is the single-pointed meditate. Basically, you see two kinds of meditation. One analytical meditation, one single-pointed sort of meditation. Two kinds. So actually, we use, you see, these two meditations. I think every sort of kasota, I think our daily life, actually, I think we are doing. Now, for example, the businessmen or women, you see, analyze how to get maximum profit. Analyze. That's analytical meditation. Then once you convince now this is the best way, then concentrate on it. Say single-pointed sort of faith or something. That is a single-pointed meditation. We actually, you see, do that. I think food. You see, firstly, testing the way. That's analytical meditation. Then good taste, and for a short moment, without other thinking, just because of the testing some because of that. Because the
taste, the good taste, for a while.
Relishing. I don't know.
Without doing any analysis.
This is some kind
just
of
focusing your mind
first
on the
test.
delicious taste.
That's analyze. Then you get satisfaction.
Relishing it.
Then a short moment. That's the single-pointed meditation. I think our daily life you should go that way. Now you see, the focusing on deeper sort of subject. Firstly, analyze. Without knowing, without some actual experience, then no basis of single-pointed meditation. So you need analytical meditation. Through analytical meditation, you see, once you get deeper understanding and not only understanding, but some kind of experience, some kind of firm sort of conviction. And conviction brings experience. Then, when you actually sort of get experience, then without analyze, remain on it. So both method is familiarizing these. Now, for example, compassion. First, analyze pros and cons, compassion and anger, hatred. Then that gradually bring conviction, firm conviction. Oh, I must increase compassion. Then, you see, familiarize. Some experience develop. Then, for bit of longer period, analyze. When develop conviction, then short period, meditate on it. Like that. That's the Inda. That's the Karsa Chisamanda. Simne Trubiati, any Utada, any Changsada, the Zunalo, Dodian Zunalolia, Simne Trudanko, Shipsau any Shipsaga Chik Dinariore, Lobakamala Shile, Umrim Nariore.
तो अपने चित्त को समथ में लाने के लिए कई ग्रंथों में कहा गया
wish to train your mind through the what are known as the steps, the 9 steps to cultivate single-pointed concentration. You can actually study about these in the Madhyanta Vibhanga, the distinction between the center and the extremes, and then also Sutra Alamkara and Kamalashila's Bhavanakrama.
Nyebangapang, any Duji Dane, Semne Gurimbe, ya journey, things you talk to Jugre Sunada.
The Madhyanta Vibhanga by Maitreya, it's mentioned, in fact, the 5 different faults which actually hinder us from cultivating single-pointed concentrations, and how to overcome them through the application of what are known as the 8 processes, 8 applications. And then gradually, through this, by how to cultivate this single-pointed concentration.
띵인지 이실 주고 뭐도 왕실 주고야 말이야. 그래서 드림이 이르잖아요. but method the ushashana ngal the method the number the roll shache roll shache samle ya yingul shatebe any da method 튼집 줘봐 그 디숭년스도와 띵징 미긴 숭년사디 어다고 로리야 잉울이야 메더디 베 이브다 카다도 디데 베 차라메 잉울 싸와체 에네 다가가는 로지도 샤바다
तो जो समाधि की अवस्था है
So when we try to, without going into details, when we try to cultivate single-pointed concentration, what we need is, first of all, to identify the object on which you're going to focus your mind. It can be even a flower that you can use. It's okay to use this. And so when you try to develop single-pointed concentration on flower, what you need to do first is look at the flower with your eyes, but then the concentration itself is not developed with eyes as such, but you have to use your mind, have a clear picture of it, the flower in your mind, and then focus on that image. Also use certain parts of the body, the different the drops or the different chakras inside the body that you can use also as focus of your mind for concentration.
수제 지면 되게. 디 말해. 디 수제 독 샤시도. 어디? 타고야. 어디스? 디야. 크기야. 리송 차송. 야. 시바 코르 삼다시. 셈 코르 삼다시. 미긴 샤시.
तो फिर उसके पहले तो अपने शरीर इत्यादि को
itself
देखना
as the focus of your concentration practice.
तो अगर
So when you use the mind as your focus of the cultivation of concentration, first of all, you have to be able to identify the mind itself.
드라마를 중대부터 다 nga drive ngo nga nyong ji ta ngo bu de chen de chamba jor ba de ba ka ge mo jo she ta maung ba le ya ji de sam de chi sam de yung gu sam chen de maung ba mi de be nam do ju te de mu mo su che ta de be chamba de ka 마음과 제자가 남도에 끼르모 주체 독스다 대외이나 합칼이야 즉 동상으로 지금 나온지 샤야도와 다 네가도 그러지 봐 윤내 투버 중원이나 애네데네 세섬 릭섬 영섬 지기 즉 묘지 림도가 로지 샤용해지 와다디 선을 위시네기 미팅 녀버스는 있었다
तो जब हम चित्त को देख
And so when you use the mind itself as the focus, first what you need to do for concentration practice, what you need to do is forsake or stop all kinds of past memories, whatever experiences you had in the past, they should not come in your mind. And you should stop the past memories as well as stop the future anticipation of what's coming in the future. So don't think about the future as well. And then when you try to maintain your mind, remain in that kind of a state, where you don't think about the past nor the future, there comes kind of an experience of vacuity or space. And then when you continue maintaining or remaining in that state, what happens is that you will be able to see the mere clarity and the awareness or cognitive nature of the mind itself. And therefore this mere clarity and cognitive nature of the mind, which becomes clear to you, becomes the object of your focus.
야 믿는 샤지 용거래. 가서 섬지 춘이를 믿는 샤지. 다 섬지 춘이 믿는 샤이르잖아요. 당야로 섬고 세섬 릭섬 영섬 지기 그 로리야 지그 넘버도 세보로 샤네. 근데 그 로해니 대하로 중수나 다 뒤체시를 샤네. 다뒤 야 계신거지 차용 거와. 계신거지 차사베 야 차전 씹었으네. 차전다 안 씹었지 러로다. 자상가 다 차도 차전 치수진 초지 참에 씹어 계지 참에 디 지나면 어디를 느기야래. 랑도 좀더 가시는 느기야래. 시 좀더 망게 참이 민들버래. 참이 시절을 미시셔버래. 사실은 인도산에 된대한테 사선 그래서 영상을 다니기 시바디에 아니 로테에 그 차제전이 그 균지 차 먹고 싶어. 나 균지 차를 세외 제리야. 아니 이 시바 디리스는 조조서 매대버지 차용도. 대베 시바스 파샤. 마음베 시바 기규체. 다 다대베 시바스야 돼. 가만 죽고 그래. 지르변은 뒤숨 써야 돼. 대바 마음과 다다와서는 숨 쉬게 하래. 마다 마지막 안에 타녀도 작업관에 뒤숨 샤토 뒤숨 샤토요. 뒤숨 샤토요. 파 딱들 전에 집에 있나? 대바도 파체 마음과 중주도 파체 사서나 다다와니 합니다. 다다오면은 강을 되는 대바도 마음과 샤토 말아. 내 마음 샤토 말아. 녀도 샤토가. 그래서 디 뒤숨 줘야 돼. 딱고 마다 마지막 안에 샤워마다 파파 짜가시면 있는 미도가. 되는 시시바 깨진 것이 차체는 파도도 두서 짜가시면 있는 아니 세리 영상겠다.等이 그 시바 커피 깨지게 차체는 치면 있는 니야메도 소시도가. 다 동선 딱준 제기하래. 나조로리아 시바 스답도 코르지간 야 링입스로 시작도가. 어다 커파파 짜가시면 있는 치수지 퀀텀 피직스 타는 자인이 니기면 나시 나 시에 깨진 것이 자신의 시합이나 냐메도 그래도
तो उसके अतिरिक्त ही
And so now you can also use the nature or the suchness or the reality of the mind as the focus of your meditation to develop a concentration. And so here what you do is having identified the mere cognitive and clarity nature of the mind itself. And then what you do is when you're able to maintain your focus on that very nature of the mind, what you can see is that this mind itself, which has this luminous or clarity and awareness nature, also changes moment by moment. It's momentary. Although in certain schools of thought within Buddhism also, like Vivashikas, say that there is an indivisible moment of consciousness, but then that's a philosophical concoction, and most of the philosophical schools do not assert that. And so what you see is that this mind, which changes from moment to moment, has a continuity in its moments. And therefore, when you see the mind goes from one moment to the next, and there's momentary change, you cannot have mind as such, something that is concrete, that you can pinpoint to as being the consciousness or the mind. And therefore, as we usually do, although we do talk about the three times, past, present, and future, what we can see is, without doing any kind of analysis into what is past and what's the future and present and so forth, we can accept in conventional terms what past, present, and future. But then when you would really check what is past and what is present and what is future, I mean, you will see that as soon as you check some moment, a time, half the time has passed and the half is the time is future, yet to come, and therefore you can't pinpoint something being present or being the present there. And because, I mean, if you're not able to assert the present, then of course without present there cannot be past and future as well. Although in conventional terms we can say there's past, future, and present, but then when you do this kind of analysis, you can't find them. And so likewise, consciousness is also changing moment by moment. Within this momentary change, you cannot find a consciousness as such, just as matter cannot be found objectively in quantum physics. Likewise, consciousness also cannot be found.
나중에 시부 다다가 차오르와 대차도 문도와 로를 투숨 지윤데 달로다 차로를 때네 나중에 다다와서 지겨를 마다 야 나고 로그라 찍고서는 야 대변 나와 마음배 나와 스티토로 다다와 나와 스티토로 야 다다와 나와 걸을래 야 샹암 샤 든장암 든자제마 되네 든자래 샹암 샤제마스 샤레 나도 대신 치료하는 신에도 용심으로 단 대리 주주파 제시베이나 참 니하면도가 타녀도 작성고 거네 대마오샤야 마도 다다고 원이 주버지나 로원 다다로 원이 주버이나 나중에 용서로 다다 차오로 뒤처럼도 좀 그때서 소소를 때네 엔타 투숨 샤임도 저거 되는데 그 봐봐 다다와서 봐봐 잖아 그냥 이야기되지 저거 투숨 써야 돼 작성원에 샤되지 작성원에 샤버지를 그 자치고 알다 르 딱성제 스코프게 패너메도지를 쌈도 양고 자치도 저서 명대 샹성부터 안에 자치행이 샤도도 명대 샹성모도 그 원이 주고 매되지 원이 주변에 명대 샹성 되게 자치가 어려워. 패는지가 어려워.
또
And so we can also talk about the times, 3 times, in terms of a year. For example, we can talk about the past year, future, and past, present year, and so forth. And then within a year, you can also talk about, of course, if within a year, you can talk about, within the years, you can talk about past, future, and present years. And then if the present year, for example, were to have any kind of objective independent existence from its own side. And then the present time, like a month, should also constitute a year, but that is not the case. And so a year has 12 months, and so each month would also constitute a year. That's not the case. And then when you look at a year, it is made up of 12 months, and each month is made up of weeks, and then days, weeks made up of days, and then days by morning and the evening and so forth. And so when we think about this kind of time of month, weeks, days, and morning, evening, and so forth, of course, we cannot find anything that we can pinpoint as being present as such. But then that doesn't mean that the present time or day, year, and weeks, and so forth does not exist. But then they do exist conventionally. Merely conventionally, we can talk about a present year, present month, day, and present time, and so forth. But when you do analysis into them, you cannot find. And so these three times, past, future, and present, are merely designated and renowned and conventional. And of course, although they are conventional, they do still function. They do their own function, and although they do not have any objective existence, they do affect us.
디 인다 섬기 춘이 사디가 리겨래. 아니 파파파 춘이 사디 당아도 참회 중 나라다 로이 그게 유 샤당리야. 아니 유를 각과도 주번이체. 아니 각베 디디 로르 샤인르잖아. 각자 자도는 로르 샤과야지 용도와. 다들 메가다 마인가사데 먹고야 체용도와. 디는 내가 좀 잘했어. 당연히 디디 최소스님도 디디는 데니 나리니 무직비 캐버즈 아니 자도 세ven 주고 인. 그 자도 주변 주고 인 세디가래. 초란 최다기 자도 세ven 주고 숨겨야래. 다들 잡아시다 난도가. 다 제니어다 디 또 신주 신 샤용구야래. 다 안다 디기 가서 주스 상한다. 하는效果的. 자자고 유了 아니 각과도 주고 니체. 다 동번이 있을도 그 주변권에 등어서 하시면 도가. 각자 모니 다한테 우메로 시사시 샤인주잖아요. 각자 모니 주고 객섬직도 주니스 샤워. 저한테 각자 제도는 로를 샤고도. 사진에 인도잖아요. 근데 그 심기 정신 전에 심사데 다 타르도 연도 작섬심마도 모니 주고 매드버시 로를 샤인주잖아요. 모니 주고 객섬직 동산시 로를 샤야지. 다 되게 돈이 유도셔서 됐어. 춘이디 거주닝나네 까바제 각자 제도는 샤마도 매비체 대르 유도 제인도잖아요. 각자 각섬 들으시러 샤인 거야.
So when we look at the mind itself, of course, the mind cannot be found in terms of years and so forth, moment by moment and so forth, although we can still talk about the mind having its effect on us, and therefore, we can see that the function of the mind moment by moment. But then, when you actually, that is merely on the conventional level. In conventional terms, the mind and the suchness or the reality of the mind also exists. The ultimate nature of the mind exists, but then without doing any kind of analysis into that, the mind, when we can say the mind exists. But then when you do the mind analysis into what the mind is, whether it's the present consciousness or the past and future and so forth, of course you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being the mind concretely. But then that doesn't mean the mind does not exist, although it's not findable through when you do this kind of critical analysis into to the nature of the mind, what you actually find is that the mind does not have any intrinsic or independent existence as such, and therefore the mind that focuses on such a nature of the mind, that lack of independent existence, is the mind which is focusing on the final nature or the ultimate nature of the mind. In other words, emptiness of the mind itself. And so the emptiness of the mind becomes the objective focus of that the single-pointed mind which is focusing on it, and therefore it takes an aspect. The mind which focuses on this emptiness aspect, is a mind which is focused on a what is known as a negation phenomena, which is established through negation. And what is negated here is that the mind that the mind has any kind of independent objective existence as such. That is what is negated, and as such you are focusing on the emptiness of the mind itself. And so when we talk about the emptiness, we also deal with the negative phenomena and positive phenomena and so forth. And so accordingly, there are lots of discussions about what are the positive and negative phenomena and how our language and conceptions are engaged through negation or elimination of certain things.
또 제금 전에 마도 조금 장장 요하면 누가 또 쉬우지 고면은 아니 동원이 돼 때네 딱와 서 때네 딱와 천석고 나서 원이 주에 동 당 알아도 저거 그냥 걸어 상담하는 마도 용문도 와 도스전이 아니 동일을 미게 조금 야래 사버다 나가람 냠는 차를 다디 쉬우지 계속 차버리 진짜 인도 다 오늘 당은 다 힘들어 다 진짜 마찬가지 당안아서야 라라로 찍디 디삼단 야고도가 옥중으로야 민네 양코 멋있어지고 그렇지 강성 저기야래 제디네 배코버게 미국 참으로 적으면 누가 오종인데 치료기 심 공해시에 또 심 양을 때네 오종 장자를 믿대도 다스게 차르시 양식 믿는 참으들을 때나 오종을 믿대야지 라바체 고라다도 저서가 이니 오종 장자를 상담네 오야 무 아니 상로데 오마 등게 다야 오 나도 무고요 오 중국 장장도 상담네 심신도 많이 보셔 다가 장장간 상담네 오종 아니 쿠버 지금 니슈자라는데 아니 자스인데 또 상담나 심거리베 심베 지금 모티브 전에 심베 지금 축대베 그도로 오종 장장 상담나 야 되게 심 축대베 또什么 흘러라래 편도요
तो इससे अतिरिक्त भी अगर हम आसान तरीका का अभ्यास चाहते हैं
And then once you have found the emptiness of the mind, then what you should do is, without doing any kind of analysis, you should focus your mind on it. And so here, of course, in order to be able to do that, you need to do analytical meditation in first, and then familiarize your mind with that emptiness of the mind. And of course, for us beginners, we need to do a lot of thinking here, a lot of reflections and critical analysis. But then once you have familiarized, you have gained some familiarization, then maybe certain reasonings like because the mind is empty of inherent nature, because it is dependently arisen. I mean, such a logic can actually produce in you this kind of insight into emptiness, and you can actually focus your mind on that empty nature of the mind. And so, especially when you do this focus, then it's really helpful, and especially in Tantra, it's really helpful, and it has its own profundity. But then, with regard to the when you do single point concentration on breath, in and out breath, it's a focus that is neither very subtle, like the subtle mind, like focusing on the mind and the nature of the mind, nor is it really kind of a rough, like focusing on the objects that you see with your senses, like eyes and so forth. And so you should focus your mind on the in and out breath. When your mind is really agitated, especially, it really helps. You can count the in and out breath 20 times or 100 times and so forth. Just counting one in and out breath as one cycle, and it's one, and then count 20 something times or 100 times. It would be helpful.
That 가. 이시 거도. 거도 저도 신베 되게 쉽지게. 쉽지게. It seems to say they really feel hot. 이시 거래. Air condition 열배. Any air condition? Where? If air condition work, I think the first is equipped here. Here, no air condition. So I don't think it's a proper air condition equipped. Okay. So now perhaps I think it's quite fun. Now, look at me. You see, now straight. Your body is straight. A hand go here. Okay. Now look at me. Like this. Now. Now gradually, with some kind of sakharata, to tampucha.
A little bit of strictness and pull it through your thigh.
Oh, like this. Now, firstly, you should be careful. If you want to hit your sort of neighbor, then go this. Now this way. Be careful, be careful.
And
Then, like this. Now take inside, take in. Now again like that. Again. Now from both nostrils, you see. So altogether 9 times. This side 3, this side 3, then both the both nostrils 3 times. So altogether 9 times. Then this sort of say, start like that, and then you can just count. The 20, 30, and the 50, 100, like that. That's one way, the initial sort of practice of single-pointed meditation. It's quite easy, like that. 다 되게 한다. 다 대달 이 그게 미국 시안을 미초어 미국 치라고 지로 로해네 돼야 되는 줄 다 지금 발주 시작에 개인으로 조디 공의 시바 초대야 되게 제임이요래. 자 이제 이전에 류 dunzile wemba sem namdole wemba sadi chekugyare
तो चित्त को एक
So, without being able to focus your mind, staying on the focus, on your focus, without distraction, what obstructs or serves as an obstacle to that is our senses. When our senses are very active, they distract us, and therefore, what we need to do is to isolate ourselves physically, and then mentally, we need to isolate our mind from distractions.
sim shedan le ba chadi igi sebe liu ko lo sung se ba cha da sim ani pge timu ge namdo le ba di liu gu be na la cha ban ju cha da da de sim de cha le ba ba tu ya di su gu ya
तो जैसे
So, with regards to isolating your mind from distraction, the distractions here constitute the 3 poisons: those of attachment, anger, and the ignorance. And so the verse number 2 in this chapter 8 says, however, through solitude of body and mind, no distractions will occur. Therefore, I should forsake the worldly life. And so with regard to the anger, hatred, it is dealt with in the 6th chapter that we already covered. And then the 9th chapter deals with ignorance. And here we are dealing with attachment. And so when it comes to the practitioners of single-pointed concentration here, of course, for someone who is a feminine, female, you have to look at the faults of the male and who cause distraction for you to cultivate concentration, and for males, they should focus on the faults of females.
श्लोक नंबर 25
If turn to verse number 25, please.
This one. You should talk about the Nana Rita, Chanam, Singing Mini, Jimmy, Shason, Nema, Wembe, and the Sonre. Never Bala. Chick Sosu Chatan gets a Yule Ta sing. And Dunzile Wembachan, you do, Rungsing Sem Namdo Wembala, temple panda yare. Da zozo sim dunzil sa sim namdol amba zore. Da di yangla da wuria lun dunzil amba sene ene amba te atisheta.
तो उसमें कहा गया है कि खास करके एकांत में रहने से हमारे चित्त को किस
So
प्रकार
among the
से
deer, the birds,
शांति
and the trees that say nothing unpleasant and are delightful to associate with. So what this shows is the qualities of a solitude, a place which is solitary. I mean, away from the society and so forth. And so, of course, when you're physically away from social distractions and others, then of course it also helps the mind to stay more calm and so forth. But mainly you have to think about developing the calmness with the mind itself.
38
38
verse
verses
number
now,
38.
38. 다 상바 셴니 군당데 다로 상바 직부이 섬니 냐버 샤제도 두어 샤제 점버 샤 세는다 양자를 보게다 섬 세직도 반내야 직다 애니 섬 내내 직다 미보 조디 창조 섬다 고메야디 송비야리
तो ऐसा श्लोक में
And so what this verse number 38 says, having given up all his intentions, other intentions being motivated by only one thought, I shall strive to settle my mind in equipoise and to subdue it with superior insight. And so what this shows is how to bring your mind back to the focus, the single-pointed focus. And mainly what this teaches is the cultivation of bodhicitta.
자기님이 송네 다조 착배님이 송도가 다 되기 쉬어야 나도 원시부들의 가시기 10월 할 가면서 가르쳐 나베 비미 류리 견지사 제샤스 아주 생각 요요 고소해 자 디드네 말이 10월에 디 준주 송주전에 사실 럽드된 거는 제제 예사래 준주디 소종급질이야 아니 최 그다음에 찬 토다 최샤게 디저래 나 가서 그래 흉나도 송여다 자 단남용 아주 덤대로 제제 최작원 너디 다마 된제디 튜브처럼 뭐도시 원에서는 따지기 찬 토다 지는 최샤지 도스 여도가 다 시월라 된지기다 소종 도스야 퀄리티 그돌이야 아니 준주디 송배 루디야래 자, 다시 송세 유디 럽중 포모 차도어 봐. 가자. 럽중파. 다 결론 조다 결론 차도어 봐. 자, 근데 인도산에 디니 유디 아니 결론파 인도산에 비밀 류기 이미 다 송야디 송브레. 다시 소카줄세 땡 비밀지기 다 착배님이 섬던들 계베 아니 류기다 이미 섬다니 아니 차고도 좋지야 어떠스리
तो इसके बाद
So what happens to us is that because of the distraction through the sensual objects, therefore Master Shantideva here deals with the faults of our senses, sensuality and particularly attachment, and therefore some of my friends have told me that they really don't like Shantideva because he criticizes female body a lot in Bodhisattvacharya Avatar in this text, which of course we're going to come across, but that's not the case. Actually, what happens is when Shantideva himself wrote the compendium of the practices before writing this text of Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, and he wrote this one later. And then there was, of course, in the Vinaya practice, in the monastics are supposed to do some teachings to others throughout the night, and therefore, at one time, it came to Shantideva's turn to give that kind of teaching. Of course, we these days do do recite some Vinaya Sutra, and then we do with that. But then in the past, there seems to be some practice of some bhikshus giving teachings, and therefore at that time Shantideva taught this text, and therefore since he was giving this teaching to a community of monks and not females, therefore he is criticizing the faults of a female body. But for a practitioner who is a female, I mean, you should use the same logic to see the faults of the male body as well. And so it can't be true that when Shantideva goes through these faults of female's body, the filthiness and so forth, he could not have despised the women as such, because despising women is one of the root downfalls of Tantra, and therefore Master Nagarjuna, Aryadeva and so forth have mentioned that this is so, and so Shantideva could not have despised women as such.
अच्छा, तो हाँ, दूसरी बात माफ़ करना कि तंत्र के अभ्यास में भी ऐसा कहा जाता है कि बिना उसके महिलाओं पर या निर्भर किए हम तंत्र का अभ्यास ठीक से नहीं कर सकते हैं। इस वजह से ऐसा हो नहीं सकता कि उन्होंने महिलाओं की बुराई की हो या फिर उनकी कमी को दर्शाया हो।
So, in tantric vow, there are 14 main or say, kasa, that means kasa, so kasa, so kasa, main root. Oh, love that.
In the tantric practice, there are precepts called root infractions.
14.
14 root infractions.
Oh. So one of them is criticize female. So we should complain. There is no mention criticize male. No. So only mention criticize female. I think that also is a cultural aspect. At that time, you see, there are some sort of male chauvinism. So deliberately, you see, mentioned.
In the tantric 14 root infraction, one of the root infractions says, if you find fault of a woman, then that is an infraction, and such a thing is not mentioned in the case of the man.
Oh, I think these are, as I mentioned the other day, it's a cultural aspect. You see, the society, a little bit sort of male chauvinism. So therefore, they deliberately, you see, mention that. Now that in the 89 verses.
He says these thought about the
Tell us, so when we
excellences
go,
of
when we
solitude.
some gene, namdo nyawra shiwa the changju sumne kombar cha sta.
So verse number 89 says, having in such ways as these thought about the excellence of solitude, I should completely pacify distorted conceptions and meditate on the awakening mind.
से प्रसन्न होकर वितर्कों के समन और बोध चित्तोत्पाद के लिए समाधि का अभ्यास करना चाहिए। तो इस जो
topic of this particular chapter on meditation is bodhicitta, so it starts from this verse, number 89.
다 장주섬 보면 가슴에 안다 시진기 슝기 우다가 섬지도 소용도가 ngondo jengi da shijingi badu ngondo suyundu zane da namju anda tensen su duyundu zane kasasi tentunju namju sunjigi chujula sowada maachane namju sunjigi bargi chani tentunju duju taba jare da digi tangbodu semjiri chani 다 동자제베 숑的是你自己我的身体送用的话但身体的我都讲了嘛的团团大卡萨ji西进的白对我都人不地的嘛团团就了嘛对呢嘛就送用的啥呢到身体团大的送用的哎呢身体啥的到身体办的相对吃养到作为成就的是呢 진짜도 샘게와 세안데 체도차와 샹든도 아니 런이 다 샹든 달라도 룹토야게 누가 차상 여대버디 청주 첨부 고반데 이번도 전에 샹든도 청주 첨부 고반 단도냐 왔어 다들 두번이스라버리 두번 대바니스 샹든 되니긴 대바지 샹든 주발라 랑이 누가 차상 여버지 과르마도 런이를 샹두르와 누가 매버실로 샹두 지시부 두두 말와 아진이 인도산에 체도자와 샹두 주야래디 뒤주에 양라라 랑근원에 방도가 냠좀 탈친 것이 매나 미세 매버와 어딘지 인도 텔라 랑든 청주 되니스라버리 지상 거서 몽구지 디스도와 엘트루이즘 신에베 샴페 삼다 랑 예와토야 소리지 마다디 자상가 랑셴 되네 럽줍칠 청주성이 깨버리겠어. 랑도 주야 있는 청주성 고면하래. 샹도 주야 있는 청주성 고면하래. 다 들어도가.
इसलिए प्रज्ञा पारमिता सूत्रों का अगर सार देखा जाए
So when we actually look at the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, they begin with the teaching on bodhicitta, with this altruistic intention, the awakening mind. And then in the Prajnaparamita studies, we study that these Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are actually teach what are known as the 70 topics. And in the 70 topics, the first comes omniscient. The first is the bodhicitta, which comes under the teaching on the 10 different elements of for omniscient state of mind, Buddha's mind. And then in the 100,000 verses of Prajnaparamita or the 25,000 verses of Prajnaparamita, these both of them start with the teaching on bodhicitta. And Abhisamaya Alamkara by Maitreya also starts with this teaching on bodhicitta. And so bodhicitta is defined as that aspiration for the highest goal of enlightenment for the benefit of other sentient beings. And therefore, within this practice of bodhicitta, cultivation of bodhicitta, there is this dual aspiration. And one is the aspiration to lead others out of suffering and its causes and so forth, and to lead them to enlightenment. And the other is, in order to be able to help that, of course, which is the main purpose, the helping other sentient beings. What you need is you should also be fulfill you should also be able to serve others, help others fully, and therefore you need to become someone who is fully enlightened with full realization and having overcome all the faults within yourself. And so altruism has nothing to do with just giving up your everything that you need to do, but actually you need to fulfill your own goal in order to help others.
Dala Dawa, Nigalopa Gane, Sim Nyobatru Slavery. So that's a little Thomas Sim Nyobatru, Danyotru. Jazan Kasaleraki, the unbiased compassion only, Niala attachment, Mavasoys and detach. Tene or Pakuna Sim Nyobatru. Tene Sim Nyobatru Jela Shine. Simjan tada mala sobe any nyanto taya mata pada kada sosu mizide chigta mala beshraga pugeta samda nya yebachina martaya yam phala ya samda nya yebina phala samda tada de chembe jo sosu mizide chig samda sul nya yene o 되는 신식이 심지어 타다가 따버려서 말시가 생기죠.
तो इस
So when you try to cultivate bodhicitta, this altruistic intention for attaining enlightenment, to help other sentient beings, what you need first to do is to develop an equanimous state of mind where you are neither too attached to your loved ones, dear near ones, nor you are averse to those you consider to be your adverse enemies and so forth. And so without having these two love-hate, senses, and then what you need to do is to develop this unbiased state of mind where you are not tossed by these two emotions, and therefore you should get rid of attachment to these two and develop detachment, and then you can look at all other sentient beings as being your mothers, like your mothers or your fathers or anybody whom you feel close to. You can think all sentient beings as that.
이제 샤드 샤바디에 뭐는 지금 뭐도 기별고는 진심부 인사바다 제대로 하네. 아니 진짜마. 아니 진소. 진수로들라 아니 가다 샤려야 상월로다. 지 대화도 대바주나 사배 아니 참바. 아니 동에도 다대 참바 패시 조조 이용그 잡았어야 되리. 제신 방배 나버진 그 잡아실래인 거야. 대내에 sometimes we are that 현재 쿠르제 학습 내용이 딱 먼저 전에 편도 쭉 돼야지 영어라 랑라 편도 쭉 누버지고 그도 근데 이제는 semjenji ngene 그게 두 멤버치다 가다베 교진 소보 중원이나 랑은네 다 샨드 타르시버 두야게다 누버 여버치기 디스토레스나 산지지고만 되임바래 다들 인도에네 정주 되니걸로 레인고야래 샨드도 남지 되니걸로 호텔이야 두번인데 그 정주 셈세네 명아 준데 두명을 올라서다 되임바래 땅금도 시원해 숑거나라 당신 냠지고는 올라서서 디송을 간다 니가 로게다 자주 심기하게 누버다 니가 로로 룩 니가 로로 요리데 이네 그게 누버쳐야지 당신 냠지고는 올라서 누버쳐야 되셔 시월에 당신 냠지고는 올라서 송해야 되다 변주 숑은 안에 고물루기 아니 리지 전화나 요리 당은지 정주 심전나 송요리 자 배지 루주루도 쪼르셔 토미 루네마 배지 준대명아 두명을 놓자는데 배지 소송이야 맨저 당도 루주게 또 다심지 거는 놓자는데 숨고도 와 디시랑 누가 쳐야되셔
And so now, having developed this equanimous state of mind, then what you should do is that you should feel all these sentient beings whom you can see as like your parents, father or mother, or anybody whom you feel closeness towards. I mean, you should be able to see all sentient beings like them, and then think that they are kind to you. They have been kind to you in the past, and so many times, numerous times, and then having thought about this kindness, then what you next do is think of repaying their kindness, and therefore you should, having thought of repaying their kindness, what you should develop is this loving kindness or affection towards others, sentient beings, where you want them to have happiness, or you, in this state of mind, what you are doing is you actually cherish these sentient beings, hold them dear to your heart, and therefore you develop loving kindness or affection, and then the greater or the more intense this feeling towards sentient beings being attractive to you, or the more you cherish them, the greater you cherish them, hold them dearer, the greater you also feel compassion towards them, wishing them freedom from suffering as well. And then here, this compassion is that compassion where you wish to actually take the responsibility of freeing these sentient beings from the suffering, not just leaving it at at the level of wish, and therefore it develops within it. What this helps is to develop within yourself this courage to actually take the responsibility on your shoulder to help other sentient beings, and therefore you develop this extraordinary resolve to actually take the responsibility to save other sentient beings and to free them from suffering and lead them to happiness. And therefore, when you check within yourself whether you really have that kind of capability to help others completely or not from suffering, whether you have the capability now to bring them to happiness, of course you will find that you do not have that yet. And therefore, who has this kind of capability is a Buddha, a fully enlightened person. And therefore, you think of wishing to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. And this is what is taught according to the sevenfold instruction of cause and effect. And then Master Shantideva here deals with the exchanging self and others, which is a more powerful means of developing bodhicitta, which is found in the sources like Ratnavali, Bodhicitta Vivarana, and so forth by Nagarjuna.
다 the shen 니가 로 동에 민두버 자자 자자버 지고래 대원 되버 자자 자자버 지고래 다 개발 가서는 다서는 찍으러 shen스는 타이버로 다디 개시중 사람 다바이나 망어데 개치로 소소 미치로 자 근데 인도산은 다데 랑니 다 동네 민두버다 대원되버 인도산에 디타네 그런 용 배주셔버나시 난게태도 besimje 디디 소소소소 동네 지파 마요야 지다 대원야 지금 배주셔도 찍고 봐 다와나 소소 랑도 랑지 전에 동네세야다 대화를 시거래 이 소소 들으지 심 깨고 가르슬라바 있나 이 처직네 소소야 그래서 투도 지금 샴페인 중요하게 고급지에 예대버 봐 그냥 편도지 영화도가 사고를도야 소소 정리기 심 뭐지 보면 망세디디 랑진진 디 차용도가 지금 그 현지지 상담도 대속이 랑진진 그 관계 심배도 시 콩도 취대하고 심배 시 부수로 돈에 남다로 죽게 되고 혹시 발령에디 현진진 려려도가 자, 드리는 다와 드리기 랑 진진기 곧 두번에 삼. 셴 진진기 연대 곧 두번에 삼네. 드리지 그 돈에 이 셴드 돈이 그 로리야 이 촌. 로 대초소 창야지. 다 됐은 거야.
So verse number 90 is, first of all, I should make an effort to meditate upon the quality of between self and others. I should protect all beings as I do myself, because we are equal in wanting pleasure and not wanting pain. And so when you think along these lines, what you find is that you think about the happiness and suffering of oneself and others. And then when you compare yourself and others, of course, you are just a single person, whereas others are numerous or infinite in number. And therefore, if you think carefully whether it's more important to think about oneself alone or the numerous others, of course, you'll find that it's more important to think about others who are numerous and infinite. And therefore, although, of course, you may say that each and every one of us want happiness and not want suffering, therefore each and every one of us actually can do what we, try to achieve what we want and overcome what we don't want. Each everyone is busy, doing this. But then why do we need to actually think of helping others out of suffering? On the one hand, of course, when you actually dedicate yourself to help others, it gives you the courage to, although you may not have the full capability to help others yet, it gives you the courage to be able to do so in the future as well. And then secondly, what this does is that it actually helps us to diminish our extreme self-cherishing attitude, because of which we are creating a lot of problems for ourselves, difficulties for ourselves, as well as others. And therefore, we have, because of selfishness, self-cherishing attitude, we have fear, anxiety, and so forth. and you are not able to even help yourself fully, and therefore it helps to overcome this, and therefore you need to think about cherishing the faults or defects of cherishing oneself alone, and the benefits of cherishing others. And then you familiarize your mind with these two meditations, and then develop the sense of helping others.
श्लोक नंबर 95
강시 다다 현이가 대원도도 숨어라 다다 차버 지는 강시 다직 대원전 강시 다다 현이가 동해면도 숨어라 다다 차버 지는 강시 현미 딱숨체 자다 직되기 다 동해면도 대원도 꼭 끊어 숨거리는 소수치고 삼다한테 가져요 지송조
तो इसमें कहा गया है कि जब दूसरे भी अपनी तरह सुख चाहते हैं तो फिर हम अकेले क्यों अपने सुख की कामना करते हैं क्यों अकेले अपने सुख सुविधा के लिए प्रयत्न करें और इसी प्रकार जब स्वयं और दूसरों के दुख निवारण चाहते हैं तो फिर यह कैसे उचित है कि असंख्य
are similar in that we wish to be happy. What is so special about me? Why do I strive for my happiness alone? And when both myself and others are similar in that we do not wish suffer, what is so special about me? Why do I protect myself and not others?
semjan namda gyawale gyan kaza sanje chundu rawala gyala kuji dishin do semjan lami ji sus sanje ji goban toya gi du zogo ji de sanje gi sai yuan dan tong dingmon du chan de ge da ba jeni toya gi du ji chi go res 근데 저주 돈이 누베지 치고리스 다 규소직이 닝지레스 디 심절미는 연구하레스 저장가 동해의 잔득이 닝지서부 된듯이 영화라 미국 심절미는 연구하래 자 근데 인도산에 꼭 간다 미국 될 때네 아니 간다 동해의 잔득이다 닝도지 두스게는 시기변잖아요 대인이 저주 돈이 누버 장 연구해 인도 간다 이는 산지 고반 토야 돼 제가 산지 입에 진럽다 진제디 제가 심정 진제스 디 담버스도 가 자, 드네 인도산에 뭐냐 지겠다 아니 산지 진지부레디 지 시스템을 좀 강력하게 매봐 나는 아주 수스데 냠다고 심정디디 진이 전부 쉬우지래샤 행사하고 말씀하신 첩조부터 시간을 예대버디 인다 성마다시잖아 진심으로 이번 잔다라 찍대 직 뒤니 탈시버래 다 찍대하다 냠타고래 소소문에 커덕해요 말때 내가 찍이 편도 해주네 다 뒤문에 찍 럽쳐버려도가 그거 입어려도가 편도 입어려도가 소소문에 삼바 나온다고 셈지 와다 랑게 류가 있음부디 샌도 코너를 봐 믹세 샌도를 째서 지기 편받다 그저도 라는 게 제가 있나 내가 지금 편에 편벌 사진이 인도산에 어다 전대에 전에 다 로장나 즉 샌든 이제 샴페인 주야고 로식 레인 것도 가 아니 샌을 집에서 로식 레인 것도 가다 디체
तो कल के अध्याय में जैसा धैर्य
So earlier, yesterday we covered the 6th chapter, where it is actually said that although they are called in relation to both the Buddhas and sentient beings, we are able to attain Buddhahood. Why do we respect Buddhas, venerate Buddhas, and not sentient beings? And here, of all, we wish to reach the Buddhahood because of seeing all the good qualities in Buddhahood, and therefore there is this wish or the aspiration to become a Buddha on the one hand, and that aspiration compassion is developed when we think of helping others. But then in the process also, we need to know that in relation to sentient beings, we need also to develop compassion. That compassion, this is the determination and the dedication to free other sentient beings from suffering. And therefore, if it is also the case that we, in relation to sentient beings, we develop compassion, which is the root of bodhicitta, that which is focused on the enlightenment. Why do we actually revere the Buddhas and not the sentient beings? And so both sentient beings and the Buddhas are equally kind to us. But the Buddhas do not have any problem. But then the sentient beings are suffering. And therefore, we need to think about their suffering and feel determined to help others.
미국 심전은 미국에 아니 닝지 심도 장에 있는 산제 차버리. 진짜 지정 그 레볼이야 아주 멤버다 대바 예배 저기 뒤주 전주 심도 닝지 심볼이야. 오늘다 매바 쳐가지고 와. 대자의 심전 토도. 자 드디 인도 산제 로야게 주소르데 냠타고 심전을 떼네. 심전 미국을 전에 뒤 용기 소스도 와. 자 드디부터 산제티 직도 공야 돼. 난게테도 심정에다 토용 공대야 신발에. 그래서 드디 인도 안주 수스데 산제를 겹시시 대바체. 자치무시. 산제 사다 잡아 남지 막 붙이고 넣으신게 배 저완자서다 된제세 유심자는 아주 매버다나 콜로레도. 지금 그 산제를 대바여버 뒤쪽에 산제 유고방 강을 때네 터바다. 강그 돈도 산지 유고방 두번 제베 냠타고 심전이야 야원도도 매듭지도 와. 근데 야고 삼다버리나 직선나 구조시키기도 와.
तो
So, of course, when we think about Buddhas, I mean, of course, we feel called reverence and called all these kind of good qualities in relation to Buddhas. But then, when you think about a Buddhahood, what happens is how a Buddhahood actually comes about is through the practice of compassion. Someone becomes a Buddha through the practice of compassion, which leads to the development of bodhicitta. And then the bodhicitta, which comes from compassion, actually is developed in because of sentient beings. So because of sentient beings, you are able to develop compassion, great compassion, this dedicated heart, this special resolve and so forth. And therefore, you see the suffering nature of sentient beings and you want to help them out of this suffering. And therefore, through that, you wish to become, that leads to wishing to become a Buddha. And therefore, a Buddhahood comes through the practice of bodhicitta. And then once someone becomes a Buddha, of course, the Buddhas always think of helping other sentient beings. And therefore, those of us who have revered the Buddhas and consider them sacred and so forth, should actually keep, there's no way we can neglect the sentient beings at all.
샹기 닝지 샹 동이 나올 메시별로 공공감는 가서 소소배 뭐 집치기스 용도와 디네주 가가르샤 처치네 디나는 무슨 있잖아 아니 닝지 관배 겐게 샹 동이 나올 메시별 닝지 관배 소소 심도 롱롱으로 차와이네 디 아니 저의 동네를 더 도래이나다 켜네 디네 마스브 차요 말이스 네 송도와 다 개치시지 배지 디레 랑니 동해지 나와 즉 나를 유르자네 배 셈레야 배 슝체 다치 간자 사물지 즉 hopeless helpless 디 소치를 임도 샹지 동해 삼 유르자네 배 닝도 배 가서 배 닝도 땜부지 연이 랑 가르치 랑 그다 조 마서버체네 샹지 동네지 나와를 미스로 로케르선에 딩데 닝도도가 랑게 동네기 나를 유르자네 셈부 소시데로 샹 동네 나와를 미스로 로케르선에 커도데 또 지금 셈 롱롱 보셔봐 있네 배 딩데 배 소소소 이지 뽑아 닝도 표도 치부지 알아 때 켜버 싶시도.
So verse number 4 raises a question, of course, which usually sometimes is raised by other people as well. And so it says that since this compassion will bring me much misery, why should I exert myself to develop it? Of course, when you think about compassion, you may think that if you develop compassion, you feel for others, you have this empathy, it's thinking of suffering of others, and that actually disturbs your mind, your peace of mind, and so forth. But actually, if you really look closely at compassion, it is not the case that it disturbs your peace of mind at all, because it is, on the contrary, it brings, although on the immediate level there may be some kind of a disturbance that you may feel, but then deep down there is full of confidence, courage, and so forth to help others. Whereas when you lead a selfish life, where you think only about yourself and not others, and then when something wrong something wrong happens to you, you sometimes even become totally helpless, and then that leads to hopelessness and depression and so forth. Whereas this is not the case with compassion at all.
Tena medon danze ji gyaben neba sheyane dagi dunga masede mambu dunga senju chiris. Tezo gyuni komgyoba shenji dunga shigawe pemen soro ngabata name bayan yugonjo. Simshan namne chawa na gaya jakso kanyinba dini jine chaumeno taban debe jishi chaas. Shibish neba chibuduwa sikdiri. Ha leben neba. Tang mwana tane kibe rangdu tunyi dimbe lotel rangdu hisobe da kanda re da rani chibu shidi tunyi geda lotela ta di ngocha shuyungdo wa. Wana chane shide yungdo wa. Di sanje yi galung ris mebeche, drupchi kwen. Namju yangbe tuane do gyunzen reshe kyonyudu sane, ta teshin no shuya mado kage thamdo wa. Ranjinzi godewa shirare, kadewa shirare, tu tadabu, wana chane shen jinzi 예전에 송유도 전에 다 까베신스도야 봐도 깎게면도 봐. 뭐는 전에 근데 뭐 모르셔.
Then, as long as continue to read through 104, it says, "Should I contemplate the suffering of living creatures? How could the misery of compassion be more? And if by one person's suffering, the suffering of many would be destroyed, surely kind-hearted people would accept it for the sake of themselves and others." Thus, the Bodhisattva Supushpa Chandra, although aware of harm the king would cause him, accepted his own suffering in order to eradicate the miseries of many. Thus, because they love to pacify the pains of others, those whose minds are attuned in this way would enter even the deepest hell, just as a wild goose plunges into a lotus pool. Will not the ocean of joy that shall exist when all beings are free be sufficient for me? What am I doing, wishing for my liberation alone? And so when you think along these lines, of course, you'll find that it's worth cultivating this compassion, which leads to the bodhicitta. Although at the immediate level, it may seem like your peace of mind is disturbed by compassion, but then deep down you have compassion, confidence, and so forth. And therefore, these lines actually give very powerful reason to cultivate altruism, and you will only be able to say that this is really right, nothing else is true. And so self-cherishing attitude can be actually overcome through these reasonings.
동네를 제가 전다도 소수직배 룡아 이순고 관에 직배 컨디직이다 깔래로 되고 죽네 어디니 대대별관에 현실 다를 넣잖아 표준사고 탐지 토等你 토는 더버티 년주 년다 램버죠 디니 현나 보잖아 된주 좀도 토버죠 된주 라되면 버체 된주 야체 그래서 된주를 그래 된주 잠도가 어딘지 된주 탐내장 지 고지 좀도 예정에 된주 좀도 토버죠 다게 전도 현거나 자나 속으로 녀원죠 현지 전도 다잖아 재ven이 소 녀원죠 다디 주고 dom데 지금 대화 진행해봐 되게 현진 되려죠 지금 동행 진행해봐 되게 잔도 되려죠 망도 샤다 지시고 집을 안게 되니도 두 번씩 돼서 디기는 쳐버려 다디 주고 dom데 다들 현지 동에다 양다 저로 맞잖아 상제인도 미루죠 코와나야 대화 매 엔디션도 지대 파를 쇼게 있어 센딜이 있네요 간다가도 통실래 최상의 샴페인으로 여버 뒤쪽에 미상매 짐 미상매 가면 소수인에 배 저구에 거대버지 지금그 랑든 버시 삼등에시나 메디 거대 tren드 랑드 코주 된지 저러서 미상매 클릭을 봐 여러지다 영향 벌었다 저자가 진짜 인도잖아요 안데 되게 다들 소야야 돼 가서돼 다들 현재 동에다 양다 저와 마셔나 산지지 고바 메토바 송도 마세베 첸딜이네 거 이제 잠시 쉬어 되게 너나 내가도 더도 강하다나야 샴페인으로 치성 여버 대적이 아니 라나 기분이야 치성 그 랑드 되는 것이 삼대베이나 더도서 야 지금 남진이 고바 퇴하다 파셔도 첸딜이네 기분 있고 말이 스타지 송도가 자상한테 전주 쓰는 편유송유도 전에 안다 공부 참배 년주 남는 도지신 둘이 남는 접더라 것이 매번 전집에 전주성도 차차로 쓰네 이게 안다 리지트에 안다 원도 주비하기 특수송 셔버디 전주 쓰고 겁나 원도 대가도 토토야지 아니 내리 타벼고만 치드니는 장들로 치드니 주고 말했대 간다 뉴주 봉야게 너가 샤다면다고 쳐줘야 그러고 동리기다와 전주 섬기 섬버지고 고민도 전에 그 뉴주 봉야게 너가 샤다면다고 용대 하시죠 봐라 그래서 들이 뭐 인도 전에 난줄라는 도지 틀라면 저도 거시 몇 번째 순수 차살로 변화의 미기 주차샤나 랑이 디고사나 동해 연구를 세네 랑준제도 체디 아니 미기주 봉하다 샹라 제베로 께니 아니 샹라다 내가 되게 말이야 삼베토네 미기주 도만 이우데 자치 중 법치 중 쉬우시도 소셜로 쏘고 domba 찍거리지 dom당고 랑준제도 진짜 domba 찍다 샹준제도 dom야 찍니도 쉬우지 해봐도 자 근데 인도산에 오늘 전에 배 삼바 자쳐 사들이샤 저주 선배 된대게다 냠는디 지 로장니 지금 냠는 체토나 와다배 겨울로부시 소토야 지 천디기버 치치몽원도 토야 자자 자다버 땡켜라 원도 림버 뒤니 아니 대하다 가데가데 빠라가데 빠라삼고도 부디서사게는 소람 졸람 토놈 거노세디야 저토야지다 아니 사탕원에 사탕원이 뭐 수버시버전에 배 이제 서주 림기 저야지 어다 가서 가다봐야 알으셔 저장가 차도 때와 풀을 한번 이니 어디가
तो श्लोक नंबर
125 says, if I give this, what shall I have left to enjoy? Such selfish thinking is the way of the ghosts. If I enjoy this, what shall I have left to give? Such selfless thinking is the quality of the gods, and so forth until verse 128 is on as read, and then verse number 29 says, is like a summary of these the verses, preceding verses, which it says, whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy, and whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. And then it goes on to say, what need is there to say much more? The childish work for their own benefit, the Buddhas work for the benefit of others. So just look at the difference between them. And then again, another summary says, the next verse says, if I do not actually exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence shall have no joy. And so what these verses show us is that the qualities that we can develop with compassion, when you are dedicated, when you actually have the sense of caring of others, compassion, then friendliness also develops, and then you have more friends, and you have more joy with friends and so forth. Whereas if you remain selfish, then people will see that you are clever, you may be clever, cheeky and so forth, but then you will not have friends, and so you remain alone and lonely. And therefore, the more you think about helping others, the greater joy and happiness you will have. The more you remain selfish, the less happiness you have, you will remain alone and lonely. And therefore, Master with regard to bodhicitta, Maitreya in his prayer, the Maitreya's prayer says that the bodhicitta leads you out of the lower realms of existence, leads you away from the lower realms of existence, or averts them, and it leads you to the higher realms of existence. It also leads you or shows you the path to the deathlessness, and therefore he says, I pay homage to bodhicitta. And so this bodhicitta, when it complements the understanding of emptiness, which sees the true reality of things as it is, and what it does is together with bodhicitta, and together the bodhicitta and the view of emptiness leads us to not only the freedom from all the afflictive, destructive emotions, but even the very imprints, the residual imprints that are left by the ignorance and so forth. And so you become completely free from all defilements whatsoever. And therefore, when you do some virtuous actions, avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, for example, with just a selfish motive, or you do them with the altruism, of course, it is more powerful, greater to do it with the altruistic motivation than with selfish motivation. And so it's called. There's big difference between these two. So the bodhisattvas, of course, because they are dedicated to the well-being of other sentient beings, they are hugely courageous, and they're able to build so much quality within themselves by thinking of helping others. And so in this life you'll be happy with bodhicitta. In the future lifetimes also, bodhicitta brings you happiness, and call a higher rebirth and so forth. And then also with the help of bodhicitta, what you will be able to do is you will be able to progress along the paths of bodhisattvas and the bodhisattva grounds and so forth, and finally culminating in enlightenment, Buddhahood. So bodhicitta brings both the temporary, the short-term goals in this life, and samsara, as well as in the ultimate and goal of enlightenment.
श्लोक नंबर 140
40.
야 준주기 배 투모 모임배 야 dakshanyamje lo jongdan chi yare ta 금데 인 렁니 수로 술 내베 sorche 렁니 미수버시체 아니 쇼직라 렁니 아니 배 랑진지 공부인데베 렁니디 쇼직을 세다 아니 쇼직라 냠탁베 심제 세다 렁니 로 술 내베 주기 팔때 단도스 단 란치고 삼데버티기 이니 니미 삼다 란셴 야워토나 다 룽그레 룽고 말레스 다 도센 삼단연데 랑싱기 로디 냠타고 심진 투모 요섭 들바로 쳐등의 정도도 봐. 랑 직부 상당된 랑 진짜 공부인데 대직 님이 통대 정도 봐. 소소소 통통 견통 말과 달로 술 내버 지금 수 강사 소소 강사 수버시 봐 가서 우리 체네 엔 상당인데 랑 진짜 견다 아니 현지버는 집에 롤파 랑강한게 봐 대처럼 줘야지 편도시도 봐 어디 뒷민은 좀 주신 거래 다들
तो इस
way when you in your normal fashion, of course you are selfish, but then when you imagine these three persons which are yourselves, then your mind will be it's easier to tend your mind towards the suffering sentient beings and to think of them.
수부권에 랑진진다 봐 살집에 소리 원데 제대로 담자니 샘교 제대로 미지너스 결혼이고 군대에 균이 사제 자월세 교육고다 교육고 가르라고 해 뭔지 되지 셴인데 내통 타교 강도로 교육차고 군심차 더동 다라 랑게테 유연형 선보 대토지 다게 셴라 교 송기 껴를 말씀 쇼셔프 개디 밤이 눈에 심전으로 머시는 교육 코냐와 수문으로 진중에 대대로 교육 레다시 코진의 유인도 단에 큰 전체의 교육랑도 선보숑 전 어다들이 어다 랑진들이야 다프게 가서 그게 견주 잡으셔야 돼 나도 상담인데 직선으로 구조지 태무도
So these verse 160 down, I am happy but others are sad. So I'm happy but others are sad. I'm high though others are low. I benefit myself but not others. But why am I not envious of myself? And also 161 and 62. And so these actually show the faults of the self-cherishing attitude in a very powerful way. So I must separate myself from happiness and take upon myself the suffering of others. Why am I doing this now? In this way, I should examine myself for faults. Although others may do something wrong, I should transform it into a fault of my own. But should I do something even slightly wrong, I shall openly admit it to the many people.
Oh yeah. That finally the 185 sentences.
श्लोक नंबर 185
대치배 제배초 그러다 안 더보도 코통원에 뒤다더보도 랑진진리야 겸주시 이시제 대별이 그도 들려 못 좋다 자다 다자 랑진진다 덴진리야 로데잖아 그도 들려 매용한데 날 대배다 백전 토마번에 뒤다더보도 랑진진다 덴진리라 루이 징기전에 이 집에 징기로 셔셔 르 시부데 마르즈메 로테다 랑치버즈메 로데 르 시부 대버 그들 들려 뭐 좋은데 다 다자 에네 랑진진이야 땅 몰라 쳐고 거래 먹을 쳐고 거래 덴진도 먹을 쳐고 거래 근데 인도산에 대외 집에 쨈에 쳤다 안 더보던 가도 셔셔버되기 다 저것을 봤다 다즉 enough is enough. Right. That dirisha. Dinde yindu 다게 캐베 제니디 바유 땀네 텐션에 니도 무번 더버쳐 계세 투 채남다 리베센의 숙자디 닌젠 체버만 배나 다게 동네 남타신 대외 집어 세외실 로베 남레 심된디 양다 밀로 따버야 다게 냐버 샤버샤 실습이 접어도 주고 됐어 삼대도 시저도 리고 잡어 어다 데리다 당가랑저 지 목니로 지야다 세세 다 여배 인도산에 당원의 전에 지금 바유 땀 전부 전에 당원의 폭경 링구 링이 현체네 아니 댄진러야 상대 랑진진기 네버더니 다 랑진진다 댄진이우디 다 싸 가서 냐라 고년 투지 되네 갈리야 그 슈크도마 짱 투지 아니 더두디 디 바자다 저거 짱 투지 디 지고요
So what we have done so far in our life since time beginningless in samsara is we have entrusted ourselves to these two friends which are so dear to us. One is the self-cherishing attitude and the other is this grasping, strong cling to some kind of true independent existence of self and others and so forth. And so because of having done this, because of trusting ourselves to these two the dear friends, what has happened to us is the condition that we are in now. And this is the condition that we are in because of these two. And therefore, now what we must do is, what this means is that we are unable to fulfill our own goals, our own interests completely, fully, nor are we able to help others as well completely. And therefore, we are still suffering. And these are because of self-cherishing and grasping at the extreme self-cherishing attitude and grasping at true existence. And now what we need to do is to revolt against these two old friends and say enough is enough. And therefore, verse number 185 says, so enough of this childish behavior. I shall follow in the steps of the wise, and having recalled the advice concerning conscientiousness, I shall turn away sleep and mental dullness. And goes on to continue reading the text. 186 says, just like the compassionate children of the conquerors, I shall patiently accept what I have to do. For if I do not make a constant effort day and night, when will my misery ever come to an end? Therefore, in order to dispel the obscurations, I shall withdraw my mind from mistaken ways and constantly place it in equipoise upon the perfect object.
Ranamala. Now, actually, three sort of.
And discern what is right and wrong correctly.
Chapter, or and
then try to overcome the negative emotions and even their imprints from our mind.
Now I'm leaving tomorrow early morning. So all those problems, your problem, remain with you. So you see, you have you have the sort of also the solve your problem. So now problem, full of problem. We cannot eliminate this problem. What we can do is, in spite of this problem, we have the ability or technique to maintain peace of mind. Now that's the way. And you lead your life meaningful way. That means, if possible, serve other, help other. If not, restrain harming other. So I think essence of Buddha Dharma is if possible, serve other. If not, restrain. Because things are interdependency. More harmful action, you get suffering. More sort of helping other, you get a benefit. Because everything, law of causality. So that's Buddhist way of approach. Then, so other tradition, which carry practice of love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, self-discipline. So there are many common practices there. So you can take some of these practice, you can apply in your own tradition. Okay, no problem. Thank you. So the question of whether there is creator or not, whether there is Atma or not, that's a private business. Not much problem. So now I would like to take a few questions. Just 5.
Afternoon.
Yes.
I'm from Thailand, and I have some questions for my parents. My parents got sick. I'm here to study in Pune. And is there any way for me that I can help them to relieve from their sickness in a Buddhist way or through meditation, or any way for them to do meditation or through Buddhist way to heal themselves, to get relief from that sickness?
좀 전에 그 주송도가 레제 넘버 멤버네 마도소스. 성ар께다 랭행인데 멤버 그도지 제대로 가오래.
Even the Buddha said that when the fruits of negative karma matures, there's nothing much can be done.
So only thing is medication. Take medicine. That's all. And some people claim they have healing power. I doubt. I'm very skeptical. And my daily meditation, not much help problem my knees. So only medication or some exercise, like that.
Thank you.
Next question.
Your Holiness, I have been following your work and I've read all your books and I've been meditating for many years. And being inspired by that, I have left my very comfortable life in USA and returned to India so I can serve and be of use to many people. So while I feel compassion for all of humanity and all the animals and everything in the universe, when it comes to my own family, like my wife, it's a blind spot. So with my spouse, instead of feeling that compassion that I feel for humanity, there's always a lot of irritation and a lot of all that. So can you please shed some light on that mystery and help me?
심지어 탐지 수준에 심상 소수 킵니다.
심지어 탐지를 닝제 곰들이지도 고 오스 연구도스 군중기 데콜로망고니 테블로 아메리칸 코란 레가 샤제 데바다 힌도 치기스 이나 코란 게 산다디 냠도 케두 ene hendal samotama hi tang thugum dos college thedi dos tik kande sewe.
I think that's quite natural. I think the other also marshi komyastoga marshi so the simja thamjalo so ajna shi saach muin sam sam do the divin.
तो हिंदी जैसे कि अभी बताया था कि सारे
earlier we talked about all sentient beings, looking at all sentient beings as one's mother. So if you can actually look at all sentient beings being like your beautiful wife, that would be also precious like your wife, that would be good.
As your own wife. Okay. Not necessarily having sex. Yes. Only sex, only your wife, with your own wife. But as far as sort of close feeling, you must extend to entire. Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate, you see, you voluntarily come to your own sort of land and then trying to make some sort of help other. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
And Your Holiness, yesterday's dialogue we had, you mentioned quantum physics, right? Where the electron behaves like a wave or like a particle depending on your own point of view. If your own thought is that it's a wave, then it behaves like a wave. And if you think it's a particle, it behaves like a particle. In quantum mechanics and quantum physics, we have understood that. And so if we take that idea further, that whatever we think is what we create. What is in our mind and what we visualize is what we create. So I think from today's understanding, I just want to make sure I understood correctly that feeling compassion and cultivating compassion for others is about the existing suffering of humanity. By feeling the suffering of others, we cultivate our own compassion. But as far as creating the future is concerned, there's the metta or the good thoughts, good vibrations, sending love, sending all those beautiful thoughts into the universe so that we can create a beautiful world. Is that correct about, one is cultivating compassion by visualizing suffering, and one is creating a beautiful world by spreading love, spreading joy. Am I understanding this correctly?
The quantum physics na wave particle Duteng chikpa inja, tata chik thone lab ki ngobo thonde. Tata chik thone duteng ngobo thonde. Tasuso tagen tata la ragle ge waji shik duas. Tega na shin semjen la ya ko tata ya ko ji sheje, semjen ki dungen nar dewa tagara nguen sin ne tata dus tewa ina. E di thone ning ji che tuye na. Yang dunge ke samlo ma da chene kuzo dewa the na sama jibo chung na samje ya. Sing zambuling de ya ko dan jewo chae samlo da na ya. Tinde yung tuwe ji, tanda di seri ke tata da dawo da ji.
Oh, that question for me difficult to answer. I think basically, according ancient Indian sort of thought, including Buddhism, I think chit and matter, two separate things. The way forming different mind, different thought, and the way forming physical, different way. Now mind, since you see things are very much designated, right? Not independent, absolute. So, and the reality, reality are relative. So there is always a different aspect. So mind focusing one aspect, you get certain sort of understanding or certain feeling. The same thing, look from another angle, you might sort of see something different. And accordingly, you also get some different experience. That is true. Then detail your point, I don't know.
Your Holiness, The Secret is one book, I don't know if you have come across. The Secret is very popular these days, everyone in the world is reading. About how by visualizing what you want to create, you are able to actually create the world the way we want. Right? By visualizing it, by feeling it. For example, the liberation of Tibet is something we would like to visualize and have happen. So that's what I was trying to understand fully. That how do we visualize that positive side?
차와칸다 카이네 냐라 똑공도 저베타네 배지 용과지리 미차와르다 이나야 데 똑베 마닥베 쳐요 말데 똑베 강다 요구요 말에 똑베 강소소 말에 양코 리얼리티 저르다 리얼리티 모두 가르스도나 파파바 자유는에 똑베 따서 못 됩니다.
In all activities.
그래서 너희마 똑베 딱성 그 미쳐와. 작베 된저도 참아시지 민으버지. 그 튼난도 죽고 하시죠. So 똑베 강소소 말에 사지.
In all human activities, it is
according to Madhyamika philosophy now.
According to Madhyamika philosophy, it is true to say that any of human activity has to be preceded by human thinking, conception. So conception plays a big role, but this does not mean to say that you can designate anything and create anything. So there is a objective reality also, not in the sense of having independent existence, because again, if you try to pinpoint the object of designation, you will not be able to find it.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Dalai Lama, is it possible to have an interview with you later on? Personal talk with you?
No, not much time. Actually, no time. I think till next time, maybe.
Till next time. When will you be coming back to Bombay?
Huh?
When will you come back to Bombay?
Oh, certainly we'll come. Not fixed date, but I already have some invitation. So we'll certainly opportunity.
Do you give initiation to people, like become monks or?
If there is the serious the desire or tenure,
Interest.
oh, then okay, that can be done.
How? Should I come later on? Or?
Okay.
Okay, I'll come later.
Okay, thank you.
Namaste, Your Holiness. Thank you for your love and support. Through all your travels and experiences, can you tell us about a moment, a person, a place that has really inspired you? One moment or a person or a place that has really inspired you through all your travels and experiences until now.
Expire seminar.
Sajada menda mangbo pe minda menda mangbo thu du se de ene saja chebar wa chi da mi chebar wa dinde chi gi jawar mu chi gi ene karso ta nyongzor le chi gi kujo chimbo ta dari mixer.
Oh, I don't think. I think our mind, firstly, Tibetan mind, quite straight away. Not like American. American sometimes you see too much ups and downs. Small things happen. Oh, good things happen. Overexcited. Some little bad things go like that. And person or people who passing through difficult life, they mind not much ups and downs. And then also as a monk, quite steady, like that. And then this training. I think training really makes some different mental state, mental attitude. Of course, I admire like Mahatma Gandhi ji or my own lifetime. You see, I think in this country, like Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I very much developed deep respect, admiration. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Pope, John Paul, so on. Yeah, you see, really. Also, the people whom I get some kind of deep respect or deep admiration. That's there. Like that. Now, please. Now, last few days in Bombay, too hot, humidity. So, some kind of homesick. My own place in Dharamsala. Cold, dry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, this is a bit of a long shot question. You're going, we're all going, and then if we want to receive teachings again, somehow we do it, Google, train, plane, and we receive more teachings. And in the next life...
What's that? What?
Molam Dajresha. Could you tell Sunjo to top songs? And the Juma Kundu Sunjo, how you made the Zokunzo that Sakwa, the internet, down the day, Chiga Namdru, and really Harina, those young Mutuni, Shutwe, and the Java Jemala, those Shutwe, Molam Javius.
Oh, thank you. Now I think usually, Kasade, Katrunda, Damsala Kajushatki, I think October. October, you see, usually, I think 2 3 days. I think usually 3 days. Some Singaporean, Chinese, and also some. I mean, mainly Singaporeans, Southeast Asian Buddhist group. Then also October, Taiwanese group. Then also Mongolian group. Then Russian groups. Most probably Russian group teaching maybe in Delhi. Otherwise, also these was the teaching about 3 days in Dharamsala in October. So you can come, Dharamsala. Okay.
And
then winter, South India, some major teaching. Okay.
And Your Holiness, if we want to receive teachings in next life from you?
Kasa. Next month, Ladakh. What?
Next life.
Next life, that depends on this life. You behave well. Then next life, almost guarantee. Thank you. You come from which country?
I come from England. But I come from England.
England.
Yeah. I live in Spain.
Very good. Thank you.
Your Holiness, greetings to you. Thank you for all your teachings that make the world a better place to live in. I am pursuing my PhD in management, and as such, I consider that spirituality, religion, and education are resources that belong to the Eastern world. 2 questions, Your Holiness. First, is it possible to consider, in a business point of view, in a disciplined way, to manage these resources like spirituality, religion, and education to combat the ill effects of capitalism, world domination, and the greed for power, to make the world more peaceful, lovable, and prosperous?
Karsati?
Koranda management now the PhD term is any management now that spirituality, the religion, the education to zone labja the sulen the capitalism the member and the chizona gyun junjet jail the thamsing jail pejodan the digways.
Yes. Okay, I think any system, no matter how sort of good system, ultimately related with the person, you see, who carried this system. So ultimately, warm-heartedness, a sense of responsibility, a sense of universal responsibility, these are very, very important. Once you see that kind of sort of mental sort of quality, sincere motivation, then all human professions can be constructive. All these different professions, you see, carried with self-centered attitude, in short-sighted way. Or then, even good system, like religion itself, very, very good, but carry religious teaching with negative motivation, then religion also becomes dirty. Not only dirty, sometimes harmful. So, every human activities or professions, whether can be constructive or not, depend on our motivation and wisdom. Look the reality. That's overall, I feel like that. The detail, I don't know. You have to study. You have to investigate case to case. Okay.
Your Holiness, is it possible for a common man, an Indian, to aspire to achieve the Nobel Prize in Human Development?
Kasa, Nobel Peace Prize.
Jagar ki mikyu machi, ane doa migi ta samla dang da yarji, doa ti thonda la ane bezon chen shidi sing da rathu gremes.
Of course, I think we all, I think over 7 billion, I don't know, can get Nobel Peace Prize. Then I think a Norway organization, I think, may confuse, I think difficult. So otherwise, you see, there are no differences. Ordinary person, work hard, carry sincere motivation, then more people you see, appreciate. Then, I think why not? But for Nobel Peace Prize, some people asked me, I should recommend it. That one important American politician, now he no longer, I do not want to mention his name. He wants me recommendation.
To recommend him.
To Norway committee. Then I told, sorry, I never done that. Like that, thank you.
Your Holiness, my question is regarding the judiciary and the punishment system. So, for example, in the case of the Delhi rape case, there were death penalties issued by the government. So, I want to know if the victims should actually resort to legal means at all, or what is your opinion on it? Because rape per se is a very different kind of a crime.
Kasa.
Jagarnal, the female Jayam Dan Yokta Chimbuch Chungswal. Digabla Tim Ki Timda Raji Che de Yore, the decades of the Mango Yanjo Yung de Yore, female Jayam. She do that called the Dukunyangan to Zugi, Tim Rantu in the Chena Pendo Yonamena to Zugal Kalukarna Yunus.
I think that's good. I think should firstly, brought to court, and at least some publicity. That to raise awareness, seriousness. Otherwise, many people, I think it seems to see just normal sort of way. That's a mistake. I think we should sort of. One time in Dharamsala, one Western Buddhist teachers conference took place. Then, at that meeting, some people, raise the issue of some spiritual leaders, sexual exploitation. Then I told the meeting, Buddha, as far as Buddhist is concerned, Buddha made clear sexual misconduct, negative. Even lay people, monk of course. So that doesn't stop. So now only thing is make publicity. Then these people may develop some kind of caution. Otherwise, they carry a different way. So, and then wherever I meet, the pressmen, I always telling, firstly, to my commitment, promotion of human value, promotion of religious harmony, because the media also have important role. The third point, particularly for media people, that I usually telling them, media people should have long nose and a smell, front as well as behind. So everybody try to nice in front. So important is must investigate what is going on in behind. So I always telling media people should have long nose as long as elephant nose. Then make public what's the reality. Investigate politicians, businessmen, or religious leaders, or scientists, or because of the educationists in every sort of professions. You see, we must sort of investigate what's the reality. Then make public, provided be honest, unbiased, truthful. People should know what's the reality. So, including the sexual things, must make clear. And then must bring to court.
So you're okay with death penalties being issued? And do you think that will actually bring relief to the victims?
The same chin at Dungan Yang Sagan Shorba. To Tatablam to Zutone, this sugar, Gangi Seal, Japan Torabes. It will definitely provide some relief.
I think two things. These victims, they feel, oh,
because first of all, they will not then get the sense that people are totally, not regarding them, showing no interest in them.
Oh, then secondly, the larger community, get more sort of today.
There will be more alert and aware.
Sorry, just to add on, but isn't that a way of instilling fear, and where does compassion come in here?
What?
The same change or well, same change in the soto nebatai till mutunas.
Oh, death sentence. What? Death sentence. Oh, death sentence. Overall, you say, I am one of the signatory of international, because of Amnesty International carries some movement, the abolishing death sentence since many years. So I am one of the person who signed. I think in Europe, a number of countries, death sentence already abolished. United States, some state abolished, some states still carry. India still carry that. So this, I think, overall, I think we should think very seriously. On the basis, many my friends, when they carry some teaching in prisoners, like Delhi Church jail, Kiran Bedi, I know her. You see, she carries some sort of a program, meditation program, in Tier jail. So result, you see, the prisoner, many of them become much sort of calmer. So there is a possibility. Change human mind. So early part, very criminal person. Later part can be a very nice person. So should have opportunity, change. So I prefer not death sentence. Then they also, I think, firstly, possibility, change. And secondly, I think life prison sentence, I think better. Then they eventually witness, say, the attitude of the society, negative attitude. So that's much better. Let them develop more regret. Death sentence finished or nothing. Isn't it? But of course, these are legal sort of thing. So up to the lawyers or finally, I think the parliament. So worthwhile, some serious discussion. And for that, I think some form of articles and some talks about these things in the public level, I think, make more awareness like that. That's, I think, important. Yes?
I want to know whether silence and shunyata are the same. In which case, what is the effect of extra vibrations to mobile phones, Twitter?